My name is Kina Robertshaw, and this is Conversation with Christian Entrepreneurs. Today, I'm delighted. I'm going to be speaking to Sir Peter Vardy. In 1976, Sir Peter Vardy took control of the family's Ford car dealership after the death of his father, who founded the business. He expanded the business from one dealership in the northwest of England with 6 staff to a group of over 100 dealerships with over 6,000 staff. Welcome, Sir Peter Vardy. Thank you so much for your willingness to speak with me.
Thanks, Kina. It's good to see you again, and good to see you doing so well. And I'm pleased to help in any way I can.
Fantastic. So I always like to ask entrepreneurs, what does it mean to you to be a Christian entrepreneur?
Well, I was thinking about that when you said that's the question you were going to ask, and I think I'm an entrepreneur who is a Christian, or a Christian who is an entrepreneur. But I think a Christian entrepreneur is, way beyond me. I think of Christian entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs who are promoting the Christian faith. Billy Graham, George Verwer, in our day and age, John Kirkby of Christians Against Poverty, who are using their entrepreneurial skill to reach out to the nation or the world with their faith and promoting the Christian faith on a very influential scale. Now, I'm not one of those. I wish I was, but I admire and thank the Lord for folks like that. But coming back to me, I'm a Christian who was in the car business. I get labeled with the entrepreneur label because we went from one dealership to 100 dealerships, and as you mentioned, 6 staff to 6,000. So you get labeled as an entrepreneur, but an entrepreneur is simply someone who is taking risks, and taking risks for a reward, building the business from one dealership to 100 dealerships. There was obviously a fair amount of risk in that. But fortunately, I've always felt that I had God on my side. And as a Christian, I could go to him in prayer and ask advice and ask direction as I was building the business. So I had a little bit of an unfair advantage on anybody else. In fact, that I had the Lord on my side, and I have felt his hand on my shoulder throughout my business career.
So when you took over the company, were you a Christian at that point?
Yes. I became a Christian when about 14 years old. I was a chorister in Durham Cathedral Choir, and I left there, and I'd been steeped in singing in the cathedral and praising the Lord, and I had a wonderful time. But I realized after that, when I left school and when I moved up to a senior school, I had to make a decision to serve the Lord for myself. And whilst my father was a Christian, my mother was a Christian, I realized that it was a decision I needed to make, and I made that as a teenager.
Thank you. Sir Peter Vardy, tell me, what was your driving force? How were you inspired to do what you did, what you were doing?
Well, I wasn't very good at school. I really was not very clever. I didn't pass any exams other than music, O level. So I really had a struggle, and literacy was my problem. I found it very embarrassing when I had to read out loud. So my education was dreadful. My father paid for my education at Durham Cathedral, the chorister school, so it was a shocking return on his investment. But I just couldn't wait to leave school because I was so embarrassed that I just made a mess of it. So I couldn't wait to leave school. So I left school and worked with my dad, and I swept the floors. I was a mechanic, I was a panel beater, I was a paint sprayer, served the petrol, looked after the, the menial tasks. But it wasn't until I started to sell cars when I was 17 and 18 and I got my driving license that I really enjoyed selling. And, I got a real buzz out of the customer signing the order form and saying, yes, he would buy. So selling cars was, I found very interesting, very challenging, and very, a wonderful experience. So we sold a lot of cars, and then we needed more salesmen, another garage, and it grew like that. And I just found that I needed a unique selling point. There had to be something about my company that others couldn't do. And I studied finance and how to make cars affordable. And it started off with Aston Martins. I made Aston Martins and Rolls Royces and Ferraris affordable, and extremely successful. And then finance laws changed in 1981, and I started to make volume cars, Fords and Rovers and Metros and things like that, affordable. And it took off, and no one copied me, so I had to market to myself for 3 or 4 years till they realized I wasn't going to go bankrupt, and it was good. But I really enjoyed the selling, and I was able to enthuse other salesmen and train other salesmen to do what I was doing. And I surrounded myself with some very good people in those early days, and the business grew and was successful.
Now, your father had a Ford car dealership. From Ford to Aston Martin. How did that happen? Was that how did you manage that?
Well, I was in a mining village. It was the northeast of England, Kina, not the northwest, but never mind. We was in the northeast of England.
Yes.
And it was a mining village, and I was selling more cars than I was allowed to sell by Ford, because you have an allocation, and I was selling more than the allocation. So I said, look, I would like to have another franchise. And they said, you can have another franchise as long as it doesn't compete with Ford. What would you like? And I said, I would really like Aston Martin. Well, I mean, he laughed. He thought, have the miners got a pay rise? How are the miners, because it was a mining village, how are the miners going to buy Aston Martins? But, I managed to sell Aston Martins. I marketed myself well. I had a phone number that was 0191. And at the time, London was 0171. Just a little bit outside London was 0181. And I was 0191. So they thought I was in Milton Keynes or somewhere like that. And of course I wasn't. I was 270 miles up the road. But I was right beside them. If they wanted me to be there, I would get my transporter out and put the car on the back, and I would be down to London to sell it. So we did a lot of long distance driving and everything, but I had the whole country to go at, and we ended up being the most successful Aston Martin dealer in the world.
Wow.
But I mean, we've got lots of stories like that, and I'm sure we haven't got time to go through. Yeah. We haven't got time to go through it all.
With us, what did you find challenging integrating your faith and running your business? What were the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, folks say, how can you be a car dealer and a Christian? And I said, very easily. I mean, the thing I had to get over was we had a guy called Arthur Daly on the television at the time. And he was, sheepskin coat, trilby hat, and doing dodgy deals. And he got the car business a bad name. And I wanted to correct that and give the car retail business a good reputation. So that's why we came up with values, and everything we did was of the highest quality. Because you see, in the Bible, we have the best leadership manual ever available. If we want to be a great leader, there's nothing better than all the examples we've got in the Bible. So the standards and the values and the values that we developed were all really biblical values. They weren't couched as the chapter and verse, but everybody could see that we were trying to be really professional, trying to be the best we could be as individuals, and we didn't stand any nonsense with telling lies about cars and lies about finance. So it had to be that the reputation of the company was that suitable for a Christian leader. And it was important that when we recruited people, we inducted them into this is what the company is all about. And that's continued with my son Peter in Scotland. And it isn't difficult. Everybody says, how do you reckon your faith and your Christian faith and your business? Well, you need to demonstrate to your staff good values and good living. Because if the boss is on the fiddle, you can rest assured the 6,000 people I had, they would all be on the fiddle as well. But if you set standards from the very beginning that you want folks to live up to, then everybody knows where you're going. Everybody knows. We're not preaching to the staff all the time, but we're living in front of them, and we need to live out lives that are pleasing to Christ.
Fantastic. So living out your faith. You touched a bit on leadership. I know this is not something we're going to talk about. It seems we have leadership crisis, not only in our world, but we see that even in church. What is your advice to leaders right now, as we're saying, there is a lot of need for good leaders? What is your advice for someone in leadership from a biblical point of view?
Well, I mean, I'm 75 nearly, and I'm still going to leadership seminars, trying to be a better leader. Because when the leader gets better, everybody wins. So how can we, those of us that in leadership or those of us aspiring to leadership, I have to say, well, what material are you watching? What material are you reading? What books are you reading on leadership? I mean, we've been going for years, every year, to America to leadership conferences, and I take my two sons and my daughter, and it's given them a real passion for leadership. And we're doing a lot of programs. We have an education program running in Scotland now to go into schools to teach young people to be better leaders. And there isn't enough leadership training on the go at the moment in churches or in business or anywhere. But those that are interested in leadership can find material everywhere. There is leadership material groaning on the bookshelves and libraries full of videos and conferences that if you want to know about leadership, there is plenty of material available. If you want to be a better leader, you're not short of material to either watch or read. But if you ask a lot of people, what do if you're really a leader, what leadership material are you reading? Oh, I'm not reading anything. Well, how are you going to improve your leadership if you're not prepared to spend some time in going to the library or going on? You've got the best library available in the internet. I mean, you can get every speaker, every conference online. You can be absolutely thrilled. I mean, I started a leadership program in the Northeast, and I said we need to inspire Christian leaders, and they came back. They haven't got time to be inspired. Says, how on earth can you say that? That some of your ministers haven't got time to be inspired. They're too busy, to come to a 2-hour meeting to hear an inspirational speaker and no, they're two. And so they have to have a desire to be a better leader. If you have a desire to be a better leader, then there's material available.
Thank you very much. I shall remember that. You have to have a desire to be a better leader. And there's enough resources out there. Thank you. Sir Peter, you have established safe families for children in the United Kingdom. Could you tell us briefly, what is safe families for children?
I mean, it's amazing, just a little bit of background. It's amazing what God puts in front of you. I mean, the first thing that I did when I started the foundation in 1989, I was asked to build a school. And I said, me, a school? I have literacy problems. I can't read out loud. I'm embarrassed. I got 1 O-level, and you're talking about me building schools. Well, God's amazing in the things he calls you to do and the things he equips you to do. We ended up building 5 schools, and they were fantastic. It was a great experience. But what I noticed about some of the schools is we had children that were in care, and they were in the care system, the foster care system. And one day they wouldn't be there. And I said, well, what's happened? Oh, well, they've left that foster care family and gone to live with another foster parent. And that's about 6 families they've lived with so far. And so I looked at it and I thought, I wonder how many children are in care. And there are almost now 100,000 children in care. And when they come out of care, there's very little provision for them. So 43% of children that are in care will end up being in prison by the time they're 21.
43% of children in care, when they come out, they'll end up in prison.
So that equates more or less to half the prison population.
Wow.
And you say, well, who's doing something about that? The government should be highly embarrassed that is what's happening in the United Kingdom. So I went off to America and saw Safe Families for Children, started by a psychologist and somebody in the children's department over there. And it was very, very simple. It's asking the churches to look after families who are going through a crisis. Mothers who are having a hard time, mothers who are having difficulty coping. And a lot of these are ex-foster care children themselves who then become mothers, and they haven't seen a good role model of a mother. So they're bringing the child up in the blind, they don't really know how to be good mothers. But the churches are full of good mothers. The churches are full of people who brought their own children up, made a very good job of them, and have the ability to mentor another young person. And so I brought it back. We rolled it out in the UK. We're now in over 40 local authorities. We have 5,000 volunteers, and the work they're doing is amazing. So they do one of 3 things. They're either a support for the mother, or they'll take a child into their home for a weekend or a week, just to give the child a break. Sometimes we take the mother and the child if need be. Or the third volunteer is a resource person that said, look, if I've got anything that anybody wants, they can have it. So if beds, furniture, television, do you want the garden doing, whatever they need, furniture, we'll supply. Everybody's got stuff in the loft or in the back room, and a lot of folks have said, look, we will give money. So if you need anything, so if I put a call out now to our volunteers saying, I've come across a lady, she needs a washing machine, you can rest assured by the time this conversation is finished, we'd have £500 or £600 donated. Folks saying, here's £10, here's £20, here's £100, and they will help folks that's in need. So it's a volunteer-led program. So when we're going to see a mother who's needing help, if the local authority send a social worker out, they're quite often nervous that the social worker is going to take the child away. So the first thing we obviously say is, we're not here to take your child away, we're here to help you keep your child. So we're here to support you. And the fact that our volunteers are not getting paid makes a massive difference to the mother or the family who are getting the help. We're no threat, we're just a support, and we'll stay there for as long as they need us. You know, we've been on the go now 7 or 8 years, and some of our volunteers are still friends. They're really aunties, uncles, grandparents to these families that we've been supporting. It's not meant to last that long. It's only meant to last 6 months. But the volunteer says, no, I'm not stopping after 6 months. I've become friends now. They're nearly relations. So it's a wonderful model. And it's a model that the church should use to get into the communities to help those that need it most. You know,
are you working with the church? Most of the people you're working with is the church. Is that right?
Yes, we have over 1,000 churches involved. I mean, it's a ministry of the church. You don't have to be a church member to volunteer, but the vast majority are church people, because we go to the churches and say, would you like to help? Would you like this to be one of your ministries? And we don't ask the church for money. We're not going around asking for money. We go around and say, have you got a team of people, 5 or 6 people in this church, who would act as mentors to mothers who are going through crisis? And everybody says yes, because if they don't, they're saying, no, we're not feeding the hungry, we're not looking after the poor, we're not housing the homeless. The very things that Christ commanded us to do, the church can't say, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to be a yacht club. We don't want to be a rescue station. So it plays into the DNA of the Christian that this is what I should be doing. And they all say yes. I mean, there's very few say no, because they think, well, as long as you give me the training, as long as I'm not going to be in any danger, as long as I don't get into any trouble, and obviously we've got plenty of folks to make sure, full-time staff to help the volunteers. But it's a wonderful ministry to help families going through crisis.
I can imagine. It just reminds me of the Samaritan, because it's loving your neighbor. It's just demonstrating the love of God. But how are you dealing with the issues of safeguarding? Because safeguarding is such a big issue.
It is, but our volunteers are all trained. They go through extensive training to do safeguarding, and there hasn't been any problems. We've helped thousands of families now, and everybody says, "Oh, that must be dangerous," but it isn't. If you do the training right, and we offer the help, the mother concerned has to say, yes, I would like you to help, I'll take the help. And if I don't need the help, I'll tell you I don't need the help. We're not forcing ourselves on anybody. We've got volunteers that work with the family concerned. And if they say, no, I've had enough now, I'm okay now, we can walk away. We're no threat to the family, and we're not the inspectors that are going into the house and criticizing anybody or pulling the parents to bits to tell them they're not good parents. We want to support families to keep children and families together.
Do you know the numbers of families you're working with at the moment? Currently, do you have an idea how many families you're working with?
About 7,000.
Over 1,000.
7,000 at the moment.
7,000.
Yeah.
How have you been affected by the pandemic? What is the pandemic? How has that affected you?
Obviously, there was more need when the pandemic was on, because there was, if you could imagine a mother on the 43rd story of a block of flats that couldn't get out, the tension was enormous. And we were fortunate because we had more people volunteering for safe families going through the crisis. So they said, there must be a lot of need here, so we'll help. And obviously there was a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zoom calls and things like that where we could do it. But to be honest with you, some of our volunteers went out and met the families. Maybe they shouldn't have done, but they did, because the need was so great.
Oh, and are you getting any referrals? These families, if someone wanted help, do they need to get referrals to come to Safe Families?
We can take self-referrals, but the referrals generally come from the local authority. We go to the local authority and say, look, this is who we are. Just tell your 30 or 40 social workers that there is this resource here, and we get referrals from the local authorities when they see a need. Okay. I mean, it's unfortunate we didn't see referrals from the tragic cases that we've been reading about in the last few days. I mean, that has been absolutely horrific. And, if we'd been working in those local authorities, perhaps they could have called us to go in and help.
Yeah. Thank you. I really love your values. As we know, an organization values influences everything that the organization stands for. Your values for Safe Families for Children is love, belonging, empowerment, humility, and faith. How did you come up with this?
Well, when we have any organization, I think it's important to have a set of values. I mean, I have, this is the card for the Reg Vardy, the card business. And every one of my 6,000 staff had this card in their pocket. And the values are on the back. And they could quote the values, and I would ask them, we've got passion, respect, professionalism, integrity, recognition, opportunity, and commitment. And each one, integrity, we're trustworthy and honest in all that we say and do, and take responsibility for our own actions. And I would go around and say, look, this is the most important thing. And if your manager is telling you to do something that contradicts the values, then you just need to pull this out of your pocket and say, look, this is what I'm living by. Because values are so important, because they need to know what the company's all about. They need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. With an organization, you need to have vision. The 6,000 people need to know that there is a vision and a strategy of how we're going to get from where we are to where we want to be. Because if you have vision without a strategy, it's really hallucination. You're just dreaming.
Vision without strategy. You said vision without strategy is hallucination.
Yeah. Well, because all you're doing is dreaming. If you say, I'm going to get from A to B within 3 months, then what's the strategy? And if you explain the strategy and everybody can see what you're doing, then they can be part of the team and feel part of it. But they have to feel part of it within the values of the company that you're running or you're going to establish. And I mean, to be honest with you, they're all Christian values. They're all straight out of the Bible. I mean, not everybody knows that, but the Bible is the best management handbook you could ever wish to see. So we have plenty of training, we have plenty of examples of how to lead well, how to set values, and how to lead a team of people. So it's important, when you're trying to lead 6,000 people, you can't talk to them all the time. I couldn't visit them all the time. They're in 100 different locations. But by having a set of values like that, I mean, I spoke to the guys. I didn't speak to a guy's funeral, but he asked me to go. I was asked to go to the funeral, and on the little table and the meal afterwards, this guy had his values card on the table, saying that's the values he'd lived by while he'd worked with us. And I just thought, what a tremendous, thing that was.
All your 6,000 staff carried that card with values.
Yeah.
So upon employing them, how were you able to communicate? It's well and good to say this is a vision for the company, this is the values. How were you able to implement those values?
Well, they top down. I had to live by the values. My directors had to live by the values, but it was infectious. They knew that if they lived by those values, the company would do well. If the company did well, they would benefit. They weren't doing anything that wasn't good practice. I was trying to get them to live good, quality, honest lives, making, a good level of profitability, selling plenty of cars that would give them a good standard of living, good education for their children and everything else like that. So they knew that they were the right things to do. It's like the 10 Commandments. You've got them, live by them, because you'd have a better life if you live by them. If we're not honest, the integrity is out the window, we lose the passion and the professionalism, we might as well give up. It's common sense that live by the values, the company will do well, the customers will admire the company because they'll get a better quality of service, and everyone wins when, as I say, the leader gets better, or there's a set of values that everybody is living by. There's no ambiguity. That's the company that you work for. We had a Vardy V on the pocket, and the values are in your pocket, and that's how we are.
Wow.
And they came for induction every Saturday night or Sunday morning. I wrote to all the staff, so they would get a letter from me, an email from me, or a bulletin on the Monday morning when they came in. So communication was strong, and it was a delight to be involved with it. I surrounded myself with good people better than me. They were cleverer than me, and they did what they were best at, and I did what I was best at. So we had a strength-based team where somebody covered my weaknesses and I covered somebody else's weaknesses. I wasn't a good accountant. I didn't pass many exams, but I had 150 accountants in the company that had passed their exams and were well qualified.
So what I'm hearing, living out your values, communicating, and surround yourself with good people. Now, I'm going to come back to in closing, to the Safe Families for Children. I love the values that you have: love, belonging, faith, empowerment, and humility. Among those 5 values, what is the most, I know they're all important, but is there
they're all important, and you see, to the people that we're dealing with, most of them have had a very rough time. So love is the thing that they've missed. So we have to love them, show that we love them, and faith is obviously very important to us as Christians. That's that's why we get up in the morning and get out into the world. And this is maybe I shouldn't be saying this, But years ago, we used to have a saying of salvation lift. When folks were saved, when folks became followers of Christ, the quality of their life improved. They had better standards, they had love, they had folks to look after them, and they led better lives. And we'd love that for everyone, wouldn't we? So if we can show them love, belonging, and they come to faith, then that is the best solution for the people that we're dealing with. Obviously, we need to empower them so that they can look after themselves, so they're not reliant on the volunteers all the time. But the ones that are working there need the humility to know that we're followers of Christ, and we need to be doing what he commands us to do.
Oh, Sir Peter Vardy, thank you so much. Talking to you is always inspiring. I have been so inspired by your talk, the need of leadership, your love for people. God tells us the greatest thing is love the Lord and your neighbor. And clearly these are some of the things, the key things talking to you that I'm hearing. The gospel, you're living out the gospel. You might not be on Sunday preaching, but here you are living out the gospel.
Yeah, well, it's been an honor and a privilege for God to offer these opportunities to me. So when they come, it doesn't matter what it is, I tend to say, if God brings it to me, I tend to say, well, can we get on with this and do it? And I come from it from a business proposition, and the children in care is a problem that if a company had, they would go bust. They would be financially bereft, because you can't keep doing what the government keeps doing with children in care and expect a good result. You have to find a better way. And the church is the better way. And the church needs a motivation. They need a vision for what they're capable of doing. And Safe Families is a great strategy to help these families overcome the difficulties they've got and see the children stay with the parents and reduce the number of children in care. If we could reduce the number of children going into care by, say, 25%, and we're doing that in some areas, 25%, that's 25,000 less children going into care. So it's 25,000 less children coming out the other end. And it's nearly 20,000 less children going to prison.
Wow.
So if this works and the church accept the challenge and the local authorities work with us, we'd be closing prisons instead of opening new prisons. There wouldn't be need for prisons because the church would step in the gap. And in 20 or 30 years' time, when we've got a lot fewer children in care, they would turn around and say, well, who actually did that? How did that come about? Well, the church got off its pew and got into the community and start doing what Jesus told us to do.
Thank you so much, Sir Peter Vardy. That's a very good place to end. It is the church. The solution is with the church. God promised that it is through his church that the good news is going to be proclaimed. And that's what you're doing. And thank you so much. It's just been wonderful talking to you.
Thanks, Kina. It's been a pleasure talking to you too.